Hi, Dr. Rodriguez. My name is Paxton. The date is November 10th, and I'm going to talk to you today about the four different tissue types found in the body. So, the four different tissue types found in the body are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. And just a quick disclaimer, I'm going to start with each tissue by describing the function of it. And then I will go on to the structure and where it's found in the body because personally it just helps me. If I think about the function, I remember where it is in the body and why it's structured the way it is. So here we go. So epithelial tissue has many different functions. One of its most important functions is that it is protective. It covers surfaces that are exposed to the internal and the external environment. Epithelial tissues can also be secretory. They can secrete mucus and hormones that are very important to the functioning of the body. They can help with the exchange of substances like oxygen and carbon dioxide, as well as the transport of materials like ions and nutrients. Finally, epithelial tissues can be ciliated, which means that they help move substances along a certain track. We call these types of epithelial tissue ciliated because they contain cilia, which are projections on the surface of a cell that help push substances along. So, what is the structure of epithelial tissue? All epithelial cells are attached to something called a basal lamina, which is a matrix that's made up of glycoproteins and collagen. And the basal lamina connects the epithelial tissue to other types of tissues found in the body. Epithelial tissues are highly cellular. This means that there's little to no extracellular material present between the cells. And adjoining cells form connections with one another through something called a cell junction. So there can either be a leaky junction or a tight junction. Leaky junctions allow for the free movement of substances from one side of the epithelium to the other, whereas tight junctions create a barrier between the epithelial cells that keep unwanted substances out. So epithelial cells are structured based on their function. They can be simple, which means that they have one layer, or they can be stratified, meaning that they have many layers. Pseudostratified refers to epithelium that appears to be stratified, so it looks like it has multiple layers, but it actually just consists of a single layer, and the cells are just irregularly shaped. So cell shape can also be different in epithelial tissues. They can be squamous, which is flat. They can be cuboidal, which is cubed, and they can be columnar, which means that they're column-shaped. And finally, epithelial cells may have villi, which increases the surface area of the cell, or cilia, which, as I mentioned earlier, is an extension of the cytoskeleton that beats rhythmically to move substances along a track. So where in the body are epithelial tissues found? Good question. They're found all over the body. Epithelial tissue, an example of it is skin, which covers the exterior surface of the body, and obviously we have skin all down our body. Epithelial tissues also line cavities, certain glands, passageways like your blood vessels, lines organs like your heart and your lungs, and certain tracts and systems like our digestive system, our reproductive system. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but hopefully it gives you an example of how it's all over the body. The next type of tissue I'd like to talk about is connective tissue. So, like epithelial tissue, connective tissue has many functions. Most importantly, connective tissue supports and connects other tissues together. Protection is another big function, from the bones that protect delicate organs to specialized cells that defend the body against pathogens. Connective tissue is also responsible for the transport of fluid and nutrients, waste, chemical messengers. Obviously, that's with blood, which is a type of connective tissue. And then finally, adipose cells store surplus energy in the form of fat, which keeps the body insulated. So connective tissue cells are dispersed in something called an extensive extracellular matrix. And this is really different from epithelial cells, which have little to no extracellular matrix. So the main component of this extracellular matrix that connective tissue cells are dispersed in is called a ground substance. Ground substance can be liquid, it can be solid in the case of bones, and it's crisscrossed with protein fibers. So there's several different types of connective tissue. The first type is connective tissue proper, which consists of loose connective tissue and dense connective tissue. Loose connective tissue lies under the skin and is found in small glands also. It's made up of collagen and elastic fibers, and these fibers are loosely organized. Loose connective tissue absorbs shock, it binds tissues together, it allows for water and salts and different nutrients to diffuse through the cells and the tissues, and adipose tissue is a type of loose connective tissue. Dense connective tissue, on the other hand, is found in tendons, ligaments, tissues that cover muscles and nerves, and it consists of bundles of collagen and elastic fibers. These tissues are strong and elastic. The second group of connective tissues are called supportive connective tissues, and this consists of your cartilage and your bone, which are found all over your body. And cartilage and bone provide structure and strength to the body, and they protect soft tissues. And then finally, you have mobile or fluid connective tissue, which is made up of your blood and your lymph. So moving on to the third tissue type, which is called muscle tissue. Muscle tissue is all about movement. Muscle tissues are excitable, which means that they can create electrical signals that are transmitted throughout the tissue. And they're also contractile, which means that they can shorten and generate a pulling force, which is how we get bones to move. Something important about muscle movement is that it can be voluntary, meaning that it's under our conscious control, or it can be involuntary, meaning it's not under our conscious control. There are three different types of muscle tissue that I'll talk about: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. So first off, we have skeletal. Skeletal is a type of muscle that is attached to bones, and its contractions are responsible for voluntary movements like moving and our posture, our facial expressions. They help keep the body in thermal homeostasis, and that's because when they contract, they give off heat as a byproduct. Skeletal muscle tissue is arranged in bundles that are surrounded by connective tissue. They appear striated or striped under a microscope, and they have mini nuclei along their membrane. Cardiac tissue form the contractile walls of the heart. Cardiac muscles pump blood throughout the body and is under the involuntary control of the body, so we're not consciously thinking about it and making our heart pump. Cardiac muscles also appear striated under a microscope, but they have a single nucleus. And finally, we have smooth muscle tissue. Smooth muscle tissue is responsible for the involuntary movements in the internal organs, found in the digestive tract, digestive system, the urinary system, reproductive system, in our airways, our arteries, and they're called smooth because they have no visible striations under a microscope, and they have a single nucleus. Finally, our last tissue type is nervous tissue. So nervous tissue is specialized to transmit and receive impulses. This means that they're excitable, and they perform so many functions throughout the body, telling our body when to move, when to stop eating because we're full, etc. It's really limitless. The structure of nervous tissues, there's two main classes of cells that make up nervous tissue. First off, there's neurons. Neurons are nerve cells that transmit information from one part of the body to another via electrochemical impulses. And then there's neuroglia, or glial cells, which surround the neurons and provide support. So a cell body of a neuron is called a soma. A soma has dendrites, which are like branches that transfer the nerve impulse to the soma, and then the axon, or the tail of the soma, carries this action potential away to another excitable cell. So where are nervous tissues found in the body? Nerve cells are found everywhere in the body. They're found in large quantities in the brain and the spinal cord and in the peripheral nerves of the peripheral nervous system. So that concludes my long talk on the 4 different tissue types of the body. I hope that I was thorough and that I taught you a lot, and I really look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you so much.